Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes,
you are.
Yes. And are the slides visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thanks
Okay.
for testing.
Wait for a moment. Let people join.
Sure. Definitely.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back once again. A very useful and wonderful program. आलोक जी शुरू करें फिर.
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
So, now this session is on counseling as a supportive service and developing opportunities for sexual expression. And we have with us Dr. Pooja Jha Nair and
No,
Trisha
sir.
Walia.
Pooja is not there today. And
Pooja is not there.
yeah.
So we have got with us
Yeah,
Trisha
Trisha.
Walia ji. She is a clinical psychologist, Unique Institute of Behavior and Sciences, and as it is written, she is a scholar at Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. So, all yours, Trisha ji.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would really like to thank the Manovikas family for having me again. So my journey with Manovikas has also been interesting. If I get a moment towards the end, I would like to share that as well. Okay. So firstly, I thank the whole team of Manovikas and then the esteemed people in the panel, the psychologists, special educators, counselors, everyone associated with mental health field here. So glad to be a part of this. I'm sure these 3 days have been wonderful and all of you have ingrained a lot of information regarding the topic ongoing. Okay. So I will not repeat a lot of it. However, I will try to emphasize things from the point of view of why are they important for counseling? Why are they important for the therapeutic setup that way? I'm already introduced. However, I am Trisha, and I'm a clinical psychologist in UIBS and associated with a couple of other organizations. And also, I'm in my final year of PhD, which is I'm doing that program from Jamia Millia Islamia, and I have my own private practice setup as well. Okay. The topic which is given to me is counseling as a supportive service and developing opportunities for sexual expression. Like all human beings, individuals with intellectual and development disabilities, for them as well, sexual health is a part of their whole human experience. The fact that all of us are human should include each and everything, correct? So then sexual experience, sexual health becomes an important and inevitable part of it. Sexuality is defined as a multidimensional construct in which the individual expresses feelings, thoughts, and cognition, such as the demonstration of intimacy, affection, love, touch, hugging, including sexual contact itself. So, the idea here is that we, as mental health professionals, first understand that sexuality includes more than the concept of intercourse. It exceeds the idea of physical intimacy. It is much more than that. The ability to fully experience sexuality does not have to be hindered by a person or the couple's disability status. Defining sexuality. Now, this is a very huge umbrella term. Sexual health is defined as a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well being related to sexuality. In line with this understanding of sexual health, sexuality can now be defined as physical, psychological, and social experiences of sex, including the sexual body, sexual activity, sexual orientation, sexual identity, and social roles related to sexuality. These things here, I would like to repeat: the sexual body, the sexual activities, orientation, identity, and roles. These are a major area of where we as counselors and psychologists have to step in. So that is why the definition of sexuality in these lines has to be understood. Please also let me know if I need to use Hindi and English together.
Yes, you can use both the language.
Okay. Now, हम कुछ फैक्टर्स के बारे में बात करेंगे which impact disability and sexuality. So far 3 दिनों में हम सब को ये बहुत सारी चीजें समझ में आ गई हैं. So ऐसा हो सकता है that I might not repeat disability and sexuality. I might just say factors impacting the topic in hand. So it's understood that when we are talking about disability now here, we're also talking about sexuality. Okay, so we're going to take into consideration क्या factors है, especially from the therapeutic counseling setup. इस एंगल से क्या फैक्टर्स है जो हमें हेल्प करेंगे चीज को समझने में, एंड देन आगे लेट्स हाउ वेल वी कैन ग्रो एज काउंसलर्स इन दिस फील्ड. कई सारे मॉडल है, मेडिकल मॉडल, बायोलॉजिकल मॉडल, पर ये देखा गया है कि वर्ल्ड हेल्थ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने बायोसाइकोसोशल मॉडल को काफी मान्यता दी. कीपिंग दिस मॉडल इनटू कंसिडरेशन, काफी सारे factors which impact disability and sexuality will be viewed through a similar wider lens. क्यों ये मॉडल अप्रूव्ड है हमें ये पता होना चाहिए, बिकॉज दिस मॉडल हैज अ वेरी वाइड एंड ब्रॉड लेंस. अगर हम सिर्फ बायोलॉजिकल, मेडिकल या माइनॉरिटी मॉडल लेते हैं, कंसिडरिंग कि individuals with IDD are just a minority, we don't understand and we skip a lot of things. Okay, तो एक चीज हमें ये पता होनी चाहिए that WHO की तरफ से ये इसको क्यों मान्यता मिली है, because this is very broad. 3 चीजों को साथ लेके चलता है, and चौथा is summary in how we conceptualize the case in the light of 3 factors: biological, psychological and sociological or social factors. पॉइंटर 2 पे ध्यान दें, कंटेक्चुअल फैक्टर्स जो आईडीडी इंडिविजुअल्स को फेस करने पड़ते हैं, जैसे कि सोशल एटीट्यूड्स, द लीगल स्ट्रक्चर्स, द क्लाइमेट कंडीशंस, पर्सनल फैक्टर्स, लेट्स से जेंडर. इट इज नोटिस दैट like most other fields, however bridge काफी गैप भर चुका है, but women are still facing major issues as compared to men with IDD. So personal factors like gender, age, social background, personality, current experience, etc. अब आता है हमारा रोल, मेंटल हेल्थ प्रोफेशनल्स का रोल. Psychological factors must be explored by the counselor after a strong working alliance is developed. I will repeat the statement. ये फैक्टर्स तभी एक्सप्लोर करें जब एक वर्किंग अलायंस डेवलप हो गया है, when rapport is formed with the individual. So काफी सारे information about the biological conditions, sometimes in lot of disabilities हमें समझ में भी आ जाता है, दिखता भी है, पुराने रिकॉर्ड से भी पता चल जाता है, गार्डियंस एंड फैमिली से भी काफी इंफॉर्मेशन मिल जाती है, social factors का भी पता चल जाता है. The psychological factors, however, are very delicate. Therefore, until and unless a working alliance is developed, it is not advisable to probe into them. Once it is developed, a proper case conceptualization can be done, and the treatment and number of sessions and rest accordingly can be planned. So किसी भी client को पहले हम try करेंगे, not forcefully, right? Because as I said, time lagega. We need to wait for this conceptualization to be formed so that we are aware of all the factors before we even begin touching the topic of sexuality with it, with these individuals of IT. अब एज साइकोलॉजिस्ट हमारे लिए, एज काउंसलर्स हमारे लिए एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ. कुछ चीजें हैं, मैं थोड़ा सा आपको आइडिया देती हूँ क्या आगे आने वाला है. क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ, general attitude towards disability and sexuality, professional attitudes in education, isolation, lack of education, and dependence on parents and guardians. ये कुछ चीजें हैं जिनके बारे में we have to be very, very sensitive. We have to understand the depth of the impact these factors. Thus, let's first understand these factors and then we'll go to the steps which can be taken by counselors. Quality of life. We all are somewhere or the other aware of this useful framework, which is very, very, which is very broad, which is highly used to understand the impact of health and wellness of people with and without disability. Sexuality can be considered from within a quality of life framework in order to elucidate the importance of continued research, training, and discourse. The freedom to make choices about sexual activities and partners. Sometimes some activities is not preferable by one partner. Sometimes one activity cannot be enjoyed by one partner because of certain disabilities. So these things impact their quality of life. As counselors, we need to be highly sensitive towards these. Then the sexual expression and exploration has an impact on social participation. In most of the social situations, individuals with IDT have limited opportunities to explore or express themselves sexually. Now, as I said in the first and second slide itself, sexuality is not just about physical needs and physical activities. In most of the social situations, any adult would have different ways and means to express themselves sexually and explore their needs and orientations. However, unfortunately, individuals with IDD do not have much option. Okay, let's just talk about a lot of matchmaking apps we have. Right. So a lot of matchmaking apps the youth has these days give them a lot of options where, let's say, somebody chooses upon them and they choose upon somebody and there is a match. In such a situation, the individual's self-esteem, the quality of life is really boosted. Right. But for these individuals, there is hardly any such opportunity to express themselves, to have external validation. So these kind of things impact their quality of. A good quality of life for people with disabilities must necessarily incorporate opportunities for the exploration of sexuality, a task that involves a network of support professionals that provide services to people with disabilities. Arguably, counselors hold a unique and necessary role in facilitating increasing quality of life through the exploration of sexuality. When I say attitudes in this slide, we're just talking about the general attitude. So one of the major challenges faced by people with disabilities is the stigma and negative attitude. A lot of individuals do not express themselves negatively as a result of a lot of repression. A lot of repression. So we find that we have a research here from 2001, Milligan and Neufeld, which provide a comprehensive review of the literature that addresses the false beliefs held by professionals, counselors regarding the sexuality of individuals with disabilities. The general notion about these individuals is that if you can see my cursor, it says point number 3, that these clients are labeled as asexual, individuals with no interest or hardly any capacity to have a healthy sexual relationship. This is a very big labeling and a very big stigma. The belief that people with disabilities are asexual is false. Although physical and mental impairments after social and physical functioning, they do not change the basic drives That means whatever it is, whatever disability we are talking about here, most of them do not alter the basic drive and needs towards love, affection, intimacy, which should happen in a certain period in an individual's life. So these negative attitudes that IDD individuals could be asexual is the first thing we need to keep in mind before entering such therapeutic or counseling environment. So quality of life, attitude towards disability and sexuality. Okay. Professional attitudes and education. Now, counselors play a role in perpetuating false beliefs and negative attitudes about sexuality and disability. Increasing the knowledge of professionals who work with people with disability is an important factor in order to address false beliefs, unwitting discrimination against those with disabilities. Professionals need to have specific training in handling sexuality and disability together. Not necessarily a professional who's been working into sex therapy or any other situation, or let's say simultaneously another professional who's been dealing with IDD individuals will be a good fit. An individual, a professional who has equal training, supervised training in both the areas should be a good fit for this kind of a situation. Now, this means when I say that there should be a supervised training, there should be a module, which means there should be a specially designed program according to everyone's needs, according to the biopsychosocial model, and things discussed so far. अब एक और इम्पोर्टेंट चीज आती है आइसोलेशन. हमने देखा क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ, जनरल एटीट्यूड, हमने ये देखा किस तरीके से काउंसलर्स का इस फील्ड में प्रॉपरली एजुकेटेड होना, स्पेशली इन दिस फील्ड, बहुत जरूरी है. एक चौथी चीज आती है आइसोलेशन, जहाँ पे इंडिविजुअल्स विद आईडीडी एंड disability, other disabilities, they feel out of the society, they feel cornered. Individuals are generally isolated from the world without disabilities due to high support needs, limited involvement in community groups and events, and the stigma that is attached to disability and sexuality. As a result, individuals with disability generally develop social relationships just with the professional support system, with fellow clients or support workers. अब हमारे पास जो ये individuals with IDD आएंगे, जिनको we will be dealing with sexuality and disability together, we need to remember as counselors कि ये individuals, they don't have much of a social circle. So we are a very important anchor point in their lives. We need to be very, very thorough with these background details. We cannot take them like any other client in the whole clinical setup who might have a social network outside. हमें ये ध्यान में रखना होगा कि इन क्लाइंट्स का कोई सोशल नेटवर्क या कोई सोशल रिलेशनशिप बाहर नहीं है, टिपिकली जो सेक्सुअलिटी एंड डिसेबिलिटी. So we are that prime anchor point, and in this case we need to be highly skilled and trained in this thing to go ahead with. One single, because we are the anchor point, one insensitive or one wrong move here and there will have a great impact. Even in situations in which an individual with a disability has access to a variety of different social outlets, stigmatization comes into play, and they limit the factor of sexual and romantic partners की availability. So, अगर हो भी सकता है कि कुछ clients का social network हो, but हमें ये ध्यान में रखना है कि वो network still in the world, typically in our country, is not that developed that these individuals can engage in sexual or romantic partners or going out on meeting people on their own. Okay. Okay, so now again we need to understand, as I said previously, that personal factors we need to understand that gender plays an important role. So the whole literature worldwide and typically whatever we have, it revolves, the whole discourse, it revolves around male centric. हमें females का भी ध्यान रखना है that the idea, the knowledge, what we are transferring is just not about intercourse or penetrative sexual activity. It is other than or most other things involved. तो हमें अपना ध्यान इस चीज पे नहीं केंद्रित करना है when we are focusing on a client with IDD. We need to understand that more, it is much more than it is about love, it is about affection, it is about having a partner of the same sex or the opposite sex and other things. It is about having a relationship, being capable of a relationship. Okay. Another thing we need to take care here is the abuse prevention training, which is a necessary factor in reducing the vulnerability of people with disabilities. The factors that increased vulnerability were limited ability to recognize risk, limited training and skill building opportunities for abuse prevention, limited self empowerment skills, social expectations to conform to authority, learned helplessness, and a desire to be liked or wanted that is not fulfilled due to limited social opportunity. जब हम अब्यूज प्रिवेंशन की बात करते हैं, जब हम अब्यूज प्रिवेंशन ट्रेनिंग की बात करते हैं फॉर काउंसलर्स, हाउ कैन काउंसलिंग बी इफेक्टिव हियर? वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट abuse or vulnerability can limit the self empowerment, can increase learned self helplessness, and a desire can increase the desirability in these individuals. These individuals might always want to be liked. They might not go against authority. They might have a way outside the situation, but because of learned helplessness, they might not go out of the situation. So we have abuse prevention की training की बात करते हैं. So as clinicians here, we need to keep this in mind a lot. Lack of education. The lack of sexual education provided to individuals with IDD and other disabilities represents a major problem. Sexual education allows individuals with disabilities to recognize inappropriate sexual advances, effectively report incidences of sexual abuse, and reduce vulnerability and inappropriate sexual expression. Ye lack of education is equally applicable to us. If we as counselors do not understand that, if how do you explain what is an appropriate sexual advance, what is an inappropriate sexual advance, how do you report such incidences effectively? The counselor, the psychologist, the mental health professional might not be all the time available. So the client we are dealing with here should have a format of how are they going to report this. We are talking about individuals with cognitive and developmental disabilities. We cannot expect them to come up with something. We have to create modules and how will they respond to inappropriate sexual advances and inappropriate sexual advances. Okay, how are they going to report incidents in case the psychologist and the counselor is not around? How is the vulnerability reduced? Okay, and how to किस तरीके से somebody's mic is on. Yeah, thank you. अब एक बहुत important stigma attached है with IDD individuals regarding sexuality and disability is that a lot of inappropriate sexual expression. Now, probably they do not know what is appropriate sexual expression, or they are never taught and spoken about it. So these kind of situations, where because inappropriate sexual expression might eventually bring a lot of shame and guilt, which might lead to all then other, psychiatric conditions, concurrent psychiatric conditions, anxiety, depression, etc., social anxiety, everything. तो हमें इन चीजों का as counselors, as psychologists बहुत ध्यान. So whatever factors I'm talking here about is related to how counselors should keep in track of all. Right? Okay. Then जैसे कि इनअप्रोप्रिएट सेक्सुअल एक्सप्रेशन पे काफी ज्यादा एम्फसाइज कर दिया गया है एंड बहुत ज्यादा सिनोनिमसली अटैच कर दिया गया है दैट इंडिविजुअल्स विद आईडीडी और एनी अदर डिसेबिलिटी एंड इनअप्रोप्रिएट सेक्सुअल एक्सप्रेशन. We need to rephrase. As counselors, it is now our duty, it is now our responsibilities as mental health professional that हम इसको reframe करें. ये जो discourse है, ये जो narrative है, हम इसको research based reframe करें. That sexual expression is a normal part of an adult life, is a very usual and healthy part of an adult life. So when we expect and when we are training IDD individuals for all other healthy expressions, So we should focus the training on healthy sexual expression as a normal part of adulthood. Okay, so a lot of dependence on parents and guardians. हमने ये देखा है कि कोई भी हम ट्रीटमेंट मॉड्यूल बनाते हैं, कुछ भी बनाते हैं, कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी, इन्फॉर्म कंसेंट, ये सारी चीजें बहुत दे कम इनटू कंसिडरेशन. हम कोई भी ट्रीटमेंट मॉडल, टेलर्ड ट्रीटमेंट मॉडल करते हैं, और भी prepare a different exercise, we always have to, which is also advisable, that we have to keep the parents and guardians in loop. In this situation, certain setups and certain modules have to be created in the counseling setup. What kind of information do you want to discuss in presence of the client with the family? What kind of information you want to discuss when the client is not present, so that the confidentiality is not breached. However, the ethical considerations are taken care of, and anything which the guardians back home, the parents back home, उनको पता होना चाहिए, वो पता भी होनी चाहिए. So one way I'll tell you how we can work on this is, so I have got one or two clients like this, where clients in this issue where, how much to the family has to be transferred and how much not. Empathy plays a very important role here. If you are able to empathize properly with the client, you will know how much adequate information has to be transferred, जितना की safety भी रहे, और कितना information ना भी transfer हो, किस तरीके से transfer हो in the presence of the client, so that the client's dignity is also maintained and they feel an adult. We expect them to learn all other skills, right? But when it comes to this, as if information बहुत easy है pass कर, the information passing to the whole treating team, उनमें भी कैसे ये information exchange होगा in presence of the client and everything. A proper counseling module has to be created. It can depend on the institute you are in with your treating team. It can depend on the clinic you are in. ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है that you need to follow a universal या कुछ ऐसा. आप एक module commonly create कर सकते थे, and everyone can abide by the module. The client's dignity in this case has to be protected. So a lot of factors, अभी इतनी देर में हमें क्या समझ में आ रहा है, is there are a lot of factors surrounding counseling is very important than the actual counseling to begin with. ये सारे surrounding factors की ही बात कर रहे हैं. We need to be very sensitized, very very careful. ये सारी चीजें revolve around the working alliance, the rapport formation with the client. Now, steps taken by counselors to deal with the earlier discussed issues, ये जो issues हैं, and enhance expression of safe sexuality in individuals. So certain steps and things we'll talk about now. क्या किया जा सकता है? तो ये तो कुछ issues थे which revolve around counseling and in counseling. अब आगे की चीजों की बात करते हैं. So any counselor who wishes to gain competency in working with people who have disabilities should be capable of not reflecting his or her own bias. We're talking about disability and sexuality together. A lot of personal opinion is present. We will not deny that. Okay. The first thing is acceptance. Let's accept कि personal opinion है. Okay. Now gaining and number two. Number one is पर्सनल ओपिनियन को डील करके हम ट्राई करेंगे वो रिफ्लेक्ट ना हो आगे. वी आर ह्यूमंस डीलिंग विद ह्यूमन. वी कैन नॉट ये चीज बोलना कि पर्सनल बायस नहीं है, ये गलत है. रादर उसको एक्सेप्ट करें, उसको डील करें. यू कैन डील योरसेल्फ, यू कैन डील विद दिस बायस योरसेल्फ विद अनदर फेलो काउंसलर, अनदर फेलो साइकोलॉजिस्ट, right? A lot of individuals these days are taking up this method. Okay. You first enter a therapeutic situation, deal with your own biases yourself, then come back to the field. It's very very helpful so that you can be empathetic on a level which is very very helpful to the client. Then number one is that. The number two is gaining an understanding of how disability impacts lived experiences of a lot of qualitative studies. कितनी सारी qualitative studies है, especially Western studies, talk about which give the direct implication of how living with disability, living an adult life with disability, not having appropriate and adequate, and rather having traumatic sexual experiences is how difficult that life is. So before we enter into the field, we are going to deal with our own biases. We are going to not let the biases reflect in the therapeutic setting. Dusra, we'll have to have an in-depth understanding of the lived experiences. We need to have a thorough reading of all the qualitative information we have, the literature we have regarding this. Another way is also to gather information from individuals. We can use different research methods as interpretive phenomenological analysis to understand these lived experiences of individuals, gather information, develop themes, and have a in-depth knowledge before we begin with. Number 3 is the interventions that are most effective with clients who have disability. ये चीज भी जानना जरूरी है that बाकी क्या चीजें हैं और क्या चीजें वो ऑलरेडी डील कर रहे हैं थेरापेटिक सेटिंग में, काउंसलिंग सेटिंग में हो सकता है कुछ अप्लाइड बिहेवियर एनालिसिस से कोई स्किल सीख रहे हो, रिइंफोर्समेंट सर्वे हो चुका हो उनका, तो ये सारी चीजें जो पुराने बैकग्राउंड में चल रही हैं ऑलरेडी, लेट्स से somebody is learning to do some life skill, somebody is learning to do some minor employment skill and everything, ये सारी इंटरवेंशंस जो उस क्लाइंट के लिए हमारे जो उनके लिए बहुत ज्यादा इफेक्टिव है, एक आइडिया उसका बैकग्राउंड भी रखना पड़ेगा हमें. These 3 things is very important entering the counseling setup with the client. अब रीजनिंग एरर्स, जिस नंबर 1 रीजनिंग एरर्स किस तरीके की होते हैं? An availability bias. Number 2 पे ध्यान दे. Point number 2 पे, an availability bias is a tendency to judge experiences as more or less common than they really are, such as in beliefs that sexually inappropriate behavior will occur in all situations. जैसे कि मैंने बताया, a lot of misinformation is spread around that individuals with IDD will have an inappropriate delay of sexual behavior. अब ये availability bias है. अब इसके भरोसे we might start generalizing any new client or any client already in the setting, which is not advisable. ये सारी चीजें हमें ध्यान में रखनी. Representative heuristic हो गया, categorizing information. For example, a counselor may funnel information provided by a client through what they believe, rather than taking the information in an objective manner. Then comes fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error क्या है? If I am in the situation, I am late because of traffic. If the other one is late, if the client is late, they are late because they have a disability or some other kind of situation. So ये सारे reasoning errors have to be dealt in the counselor themselves before making counseling an effective. Okay. Developing a strong working alliance. Now, काफी चीजें हैं इसमें, काफी research based चीजें हैं. I went through a lot of things, but I found these 6 things, by Brechin and Swan 88 to be, although a little older model, but very effective in dealing with how to build a working alliance. Now, building a working alliance with an otherwise client and a client with IDD, typically on the terms that we're going to further talk about, sexuality, should be highly emphasized. The whole setup of counseling is to be seen as an entitlement rather than an imposition by the client. हमें ये ध्यान में रखना है कि क्लाइंट को ऐसा ना लगे कि ये चीज उन पे थोपी गई है, ये चीज उन पे थोपी गई है बिकॉज फेलो क्लाइंट ने कोई इनअप्रोप्रिएट बिहेवियर किया, ये चीज उन पे थोपी गई है बिकॉज कोई ट्रॉमा हुआ, which is within the family, outside any other situations. I'm sure अभी बहुत सारे situations 3 दिन में डिस्कस हो चुके होंगे. तो आपको you're getting an idea when I'm talking कि imposition नहीं लगना चाहिए client को, whether it should come up as an entitlement. They should feel glad that they have this this process going on. Promote self-realization rather than compliance. Aim here is not to make the client with IDD comply with the ongoing procedure, comply with, whatever techniques you want to use. Rather, there should be a lot of self-realization. A lot of new things should come. Create choices rather than limiting the options. As counselors, as I said, if you are truly empathetic with your client, you will protect their dignity. You will then know to create a lot of choices for them. Options limiting, I guess they already know, right? जो भी client, let's say an otherwise client for depression, anyone, जब वो भी हमारे पास आते हैं, like if we are visiting a professional, a doctor, we already know if I'm having a stomachache, I already know what does the stomachache do. I mean, ache ho raha hai. I don't need to listen to that again, right? So rather, I should be told that kya kya cheezein aur available hai mere paas to deal with the stomach. Then comes exploring opportunities, enhancing decision making and personal control. A lot of supervised freedom has to be given. Please take note of the term. Supervised freedom in the therapeutic setting, in the counseling setting, has to be given to the client so that they know that for once, they are not seen as individuals who are only taken care of. They are individuals who can also take care of certain very personal things too. Okay, ये एक दिन में नहीं होगा, एक सेशन में नहीं होगा, but this is the eventual goal of it, of working alliance. Allow the client to move at the pace they are more comfortable. आपने मॉड्यूल्स बनाए होंगे, हम सब मॉड्यूल्स बनाते हैं, थेरेपी प्लान बनाते हैं, जब भी एक क्लाइंट एनरोल होता है हम एक लॉन्ग टर्म शॉर्ट टर्म गोल्स बनाते हैं, वी गिव देम सर्टेन टास्क एंड एवरीथिंग, बट वी स्लो डाउन द पेस. जरूरी नहीं है इफ आई हैव सेड दैट 8 सेशंस लगेंगे या 20 सेशंस लगेंगे, so I'll stick to that. Okay, I will see, I'm repeating, it's a human dealing with it. So जो भी सब्जेक्टिविटी है उसको तुरंत नोट करें, उसको लिखें, उसको एज ऑब्जेक्टिवली डील करें. So allow the client to move at the pace they are most comfortable. That counseling clients with disabilities regarding sexual. हमें ध्यान रखना है that we include increasing physical and emotional awareness. Now, as I said, sexuality, and you all have been, very well informed in these 3 days that sexuality is beyond. It is, of course, physical needs, but it is beyond that. A lot of emotional awareness has to be increased. A lot of emotional training has to be done. A lot of kis tarike se, how do we make them aware of certain emotions? Do they identify emotions? Do they know how to react to certain emotions? What if out of some emotional and hormonal rush they enter into a inappropriate behavior? So if there are gatekeeping methods where they know कि इस पे हम check रख सकते हैं, which is to be done in the therapy, right? So they will have. अब ये this is not just involves a lot of talk therapy. We can have comic-based modules on it. We can have stories on it. We can have half-written sentences. Anything. See, anything which helps your client. Okay, a lot of modules are available on the internet. However, keep in please आप ध्यान रखें कि वो culturally हमारे culture पे appropriate modules हैं कि नहीं. प्रैक्टिसिंग असर्टिवनेस, NIMH वगैरह के भी काफी चीजें हैं, आप ये ध्यान रखें कि वो आपके एज रेंज वगैरह को फिट कर रहे हैं कि नहीं. A lot of things you can include a little include your own knowledge here and go ahead with these. Practicing assertiveness and negotiating permission for sexual activity. As counselors हमें assertiveness training करनी पड़ती. We do this in otherwise therapy. I'm sure आप सबने सुना होगा assertive training के बारे में. But यहाँ पे assertiveness training, when we are talking about IDD and sexuality, we need to tell them what is, how do you draw your boundaries? Okay, how do you say a no? How do you politely say a no? Okay, let's say there are two individuals with IDD and they have to engage in an activity, in a sexual activity. In that case, it becomes further more complicated. Right? So then they can go for couple sessions where assertiveness training, where negotiating permission, where taking consent, and all other things are done. Sexual education, exploring concurrent psychiatric concerns such as anxiety, depression, which impact sexuality. Supporting an individual with a disability to explore his or her sexuality and the possibility of sexual or romantic relationships requires a variety of personal traits and competencies. We've already discussed, we need to be aware of the biases, fears, the gaps in education, what we can do to the client, how can we take note of the subjectivity and deal objectively with the subjectivity then and there. जैसे कि sessions plan किए, उस हिसाब से नहीं हुए, we slow down the pace. Working through personal biases towards disability and sexuality is a necessary component for any counselor who chooses to approach these. Delicately dealing with the guilt and shame of physical. We've seen teenagers ending up in very problematic situations because of onset of puberty or other situations where they are not able to express their sexuality and not given sexual education. Similarly, with individuals with IDD, adults, we're not even talking about teenagers, they have a lot of guilt and shame just because they have physical needs. So the idea that, we've discussed in a couple of slides pehle, that idea that physical needs and healthy sexual expression is important for a whole of human experience has to be. The masturbation is seen as one of the common practices, okay, because it will not involve anybody else in the whole scenario. So when these behaviors are reported in a setting, or let's say in daycare practices, you can have separate settings, separate rooms, or separate, reinforcement techniques, which howsoever is planned, whether there's certain things which are removed, or let's say if, the we can go research wise. If the frequency of masturbation exceeds the required number of frequency in an adult individual of that age, we might remove certain reinforcements. So a lot of background knowledge for the counselor requires here. Not that, every masturbatory activity or such activity is bad. Intensity, frequency, the ABC analysis. What is triggering the client? What is the antecedent? What is the behavior? What is the consequence? Are they feeling all the time guilty? If, let's say, the frequency is lower than expected from an adult and still there's a lot of guilt, then it has to be dealt in another manner. So delicately dealing with these issues, that means these issues have to be dealt research based. Elucidating sexual orientation. Now, we are not supposed to imply our knowledge of, sexual orientation or our choices of sexual orientation onto the client's identity. The client might opt for homosexual or bisexual or any other kind of an orientation they would want. So a proper knowledge, proper introduction, a proper talking through these phases has to. This is okay, I guess this can be dealt. Self-esteem is another issue we need to deal in the session. We have a research here by Adlakha 2007. He notes that people with disabilities are generally perceived to be less sexually desirable than people without disabilities. And this is likely to make the person have a very low self-esteem. This is likely to make them feel very unattractive or appear, or rather than not work on their physical appearance. As a result, working through the internalized faulty beliefs or overgeneralized or over-personalized beliefs is an important component in counseling. If we, want them to break through these things. So now I guess we already understand कि हमें काफी number of sessions या काफी detailed planning या एक customized planning for हर client चाहिए. हम एक मॉड्यूल लेके चल तो सकते हैं बट उस मॉड्यूल को हमें वेरिएबल रखना पड़ेगा. We can't imply the module on it. Right? Sexual trauma. This is a very important part which cannot. A lot of information has been discussed in this 3 days, including today, that IED individuals are vulnerable to a lot of sexual abuse, sometimes within the home, sadly. Right? So working with the clients with disabilities around abuse prevention is a necessary component. Dixon and colleagues identified a variety of factors that increase vulnerability to sexual abuse. हमारे पास जैसे भी client आए, हमें तुरंत इन factors का analysis करना. Limited ability to recognize, manage risky situations, not just sexually risky. Let's just say the client is understanding. जो भी उनके पहले prior knowledge और knowledge के हिसाब से क्या वो समझ पा रहे हैं कि ये चीज गलत है, सही है, risky है. Limited empowerment skills, a need to be liked or wanted. What is this? Now, of course, these individuals will have a dependency level. But dependency level कितना है? क्या life skills समझ में आते हैं? क्या कर पाते हैं वो? These kind of things. Then some individuals will have a strong desirability for friendship and feeling accepted. ये चीज ध्यान में रखनी है. Confirmed trauma in positions of authority and past sexual abuse history. तो ये 4 चीजें हमें ध्यान रखनी है when we enroll a client into, so that we get information of the past sexual trauma and also if they are vulnerable for further. Okay. Romantic relationship. Given that romantic and sexual relationships are a desire for most people, issues surrounding acquiring partners as well as concern regarding current relationships are going to arise in the counseling sessions. We are not supposed to dismiss these things. We are supposed to take them. We're supposed to take into consideration if they want to talk about that. Sometimes I have faced this, that clients talk about somebody XYZ in the session, जो हमें समझ में आ रहा है is not their partner, but probably they are viewing it like that. Okay, so हमें ये ध्यान में रखना है. We can just roll slowly with the resistance of them talking about this person as not their part. Slowly we can roll with it. But first, let's listen, let's understand that they are mentioning somebody, they are mentioning a situation. Okay, so likewise, they might actually have a partner, they might actually have somebody. उसके बारे में भी सुनना है. Counselors can provide people with disabilities support in each other areas relating to romantic relationships, such as exploring emotions, love, hatred, anger, jealousy, strong communication, and couples consent. Now, this is everything we will do in a therapeutic situation, in a counseling situation. I've read some literature on this, and personally also while dealing with clients, I find person-centered approach very applicable to these kind of situations. A lot of unconditionality hota hai. These individuals probably not generalizing, but most of them have a high need to feel accepted, have a high need to prove that they are capable of things. So in that kind of a situation, they become prey to wrong things. They have inappropriate social sexual expression. They fall prey to abuse and all other things, right? So once the person-centered approach is introduced, जिसमें unconditional positive regard है, these factors lower down. ये चीजें नीचे आ जाती. और जब एक बार ये चीजें नीचे आ जाती है, we can actually work on the major issues. We can actually counsel them. We can actually work through rest of the primary things involved. तो ये चीजें पहले हमें नीचे लानी है, and for that the person-centered approach feels better. However, other approaches can be used. We can, because कई बारी पोस्ट ट्रॉमेटिक स्ट्रेस डिसऑर्डर होता है, we need to work through stress inoculation therapy, we need to go through CBT or cognitive therapy and behavior therapy. In the background, we are doing a lot of behavior therapy. हमें कोई भी skill सिखानी है, applied behavior analysis से करना है, हमें reinforcement survey, behavior modification, all sorts of things, चीजें all sorts of things करनी है. Especially, when these clients are in daycare activities or institutional places, ये सारी चीजें करनी है. But typically, when they are in the counseling setting for sexuality and all other issues, person-centered approach is a good idea to begin with, because as I mentioned, we can bring down the other fears associated. Other fears of the desirability increase karna, likability increase karna, where they fall prey to wrong things. When those factors come down, other factors come up, which actually are more important. Okay. Barriers to effective counseling. Counselor competency, we need to educate and re-educate ourselves time and again. A lot of research goes on. If we read papers, if we educate ourselves, as I said, that अगर हमें lived experiences का ध्यान नहीं है, मतलब अगर हमने qualitative research, अगर हमने qualitative research में engage नहीं किया, और let's say if we don't have time to engage, हमने पढ़ा ही नहीं, what are the lived experiences of these individuals? With an objective mindset, we will not be able to empathize. We should know our role. हमने बाकी साइड फैक्टर्स की बात की, how one single insensitive move, minor move can impact our client. Informed consent, confidentiality, especially in terms of disability and sexuality, have to be modified, have to be dealt, have to be understood, that your client's dignity is protected as well as they are safe. Then the cultural diversity. We as counselors have to understand that our cultural implications could be different than the client's cultural implications. Gender implications could be different than the client's gender implications. We have to take care of these things. So जो भी diversity है, as I said, जो भी subjectivity है, rather than ignoring them in the counseling setup, because we are trying to promote healthy sexual expression. अगर हम इन सारी चीजों में से किसी भी एक चीज को छोड़ेंगे, the purpose will not be solved. जो भी diversity है, जो भी subjective differences हैं, we need to accept that, deal with it objectively, come empathetically in the session to it. I'm open for questions. Yeah, hello. Questions. थोड़ा time है, I guess हमारे पास हम questions ले सकते हैं. I was given an hour. I think I saved 10 minutes. Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Trisha ji, for the very nice presentation.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think,
you, Gupta sir.
and I think we have covered almost every aspect of the counseling. And as a counselor, what should we know and how to go about counseling? So the house is open for questions. If anybody has got any comments or questions or doubts, so Trisha is here to answer those. Say you can remove your presentation now if it's not needed. Everybody will come on the screen.
Okay.
Thank you. कोई सवाल आप कहना चाहते हैं या कोई कमेंट करना चाहते हैं? नम्रता जी.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Trisha, आपके पास ऑन एन एवरेज कितने ऐसे पेशेंट्स क्लाइंट्स आते हैं जो सेक्सुअल एडवाइस के लिए आते हैं और वो भी आईडीडी के लोग?
Ma'am, if I honestly speak, we have to enter into that zone ourselves. They will not come and tell that this is one of their primary concerns. ये हमें enter करना पड़ता है. Once I know that my working alliance developed है, अब enter करने से working alliance impact नहीं होगा. Hardly in my this limited years of practice, in my this years, I will say that I have not come across somebody coming and telling that this is the prime issue they are facing. After the working alliance is developed, somewhere if I try to roll with the resistance and bring about it, then of course, then I get it.
Right.
So the stigma is very much active. You rightly pointed out.
Thank you.
I would like to tell one thing, Trisha. आपने जैसे बोला being a psychologist, so person-centered approach you were talking about. So how do you start the conversation? मतलब if a person is there with IDD and the parents are there, so person-centered approach में what do you do? Person-centered is Rogers, Carl Rogers therapy, I think so. So how do you go about?
So ma'am, basically what happens is person centered या humanistic या जो ये सारे groups of therapies हैं. So I try and not include the if and but statements. Let's say, जैसे कि कार्ल रॉजर्स का हो गया या ह्यूमनिस्टिक हो गया, जिसमें मुझे सिर्फ ये ध्यान रखना है that my client is important irrespective of what they have done, whether they have completed the task or not. This is initially whether they have completed the task, जो भी उनका डे केयर एक्टिविटी बना है, जो भी उनका मैंने डिजाइन किया है, उसमें करा या नहीं करा, फॉर मी द क्लाइंट इज इम्पोर्टेंट फर्स्ट. They come with such things, they say such things, मैंने ये बनाया तो पापा खुश हो गए, सबने किया, तो ये चीज थोड़ा रिमूव करना है.
So do you have barriers with the parents coming out with the
Yes.
reality, what they actually face and what they are reporting to you? That reliability, I think,
Yes.
is not. We cannot rely on parents also whether they are telling the truth.
Of course, ma'am. Of course, a lot of things are done in the daycare. Parents को proper मुझे if you personally ask me, ma'am, I'll say parents have to be first given a set of training कि घर जाके आपको ये चीजें करनी है और ये नहीं करनी है. So that there is no, we are not talking about other individuals, we're talking about individuals with IDD. Rather than treatment, हम confusion न करते उनके लिए पूरे setup में.
So what is your duration of follow-up when you start a counseling session with them? So how many times do you give?
Let's say if I am visiting an organization, because I am associated with a couple of them, if I'm visiting and they've specially called in me for an IDD or any such related issue, I will say initially twice a week, and I will taper it off to the junior psychologist who can take it then. Because daycare activities to repeat mode में करवानी पड़ेंगी.
But when you give it to a junior psychologist, so I don't think so that proximity is there with them.
Ma'am, initial sessions I will shadow or they will shadow. I will shadow or they will shadow me, so that the child knows that it is the three of us in the setting, not one-on-one always. So because कुछ चीजें let's say repetition में करवानी पड़ती when we go, because multiple approach है, person centered, humanistic, behavior therapy. Behavior therapy वाला task I believe थोड़ा सा allocate किया जा सकता है. If the clinician I am allocating the task understands कि immediate effects से reinforcement देना है, कब देना है, कितना देना है, shadowing का क्या level है, तो सारी चीजें अगर उनको समझ में आती है तो लेते हैं.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Nice presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Namrata.
एक सेकेंड. सो त्रिशा, जैसे आपने बोला कि आप बात करते हो और फिर आपको पता लगता है कोई इशू है, तो मेजरली किस टाइप के इश्यूज मिलते हैं आपको? सेक्सुअल इश्यूज में किस टाइप के इश्यूज मिलते हैं?
So basically what will happen is the client will use words like छी किया और हाथ पे पड़ा, like say they got a spank on their hand or something. They will use words like छी किया, spank किया, and they will cry about it or something. They will not be able to articulate it properly. Okay, and then I see a certain resistance in the parents also. समझ में आ जाएगा. You will understand that some of it which matter है, which they did not bring up in the 3 to 4 sessions हो गए, and actually the matter is something else. And the problem is so deep, ma'am, that they don't even want the thing to happen during the session, during the daycare. इतना deep है वो stigma. So you have to tell them. As I said, no, when Professor Srivastava was asking that, I think we need to have a proper training with the parents, ताकि हमें wait ना करना पड़े इन छोटी-छोटी clues का. No, let's say I am after all, as I said, human dealing with a human. I might miss a clue sometime. I might miss a clue. What if then? So prior training, enrollment into therapy, like family training भी होना चाहिए. How the family should go about the therapy. And अगर
So
नहीं
my
है हमारे
question, इशू क्या आता है बेसिकली आपके पास? प्रॉब्लम क्या आती है?
problem is parents
क्या
are not.
प्रॉब्लम निकलती है?
So I had this male client, if I clearly remember, 2-3 years back. Parents were not able to accept that that peers of his age are masturbating. तो accept ही नहीं कर पा रहे थे इस चीज को, because those peers were doing it in a closed space. उनके पेरेंट्स को नहीं पता चलता था. They could discuss it with friends or seniors or internet and have their way out. And this child was caught red-handed doing something the child has no idea about. कि मैं कर भी क्या रहा हूँ. Just fondling with my private parts or fondling with something is giving me some tension release, so I'm doing it. The child doesn't even knows. तो इस तरीके के इशू आते थे कि हम इसको बाहर लेके नहीं जाते, हम आते हैं तो हमारे पास एक रूम हम बंद कर देते हैं. या कई बार ऐसे हुआ है that the child got slapped, beaten up for such activities. या भाई बहन देख लेंगे, और भाई बहन भी almost similar ages के होते हैं. So those kind of things. So this typical child I remember, then I had to tell the daycare activity that एक हम room construct करते हैं, which is totally cushioned, so that the child can just run into the room anytime, have to complete the activity first, and then we will start talking about the activity. Because delaying the activity is not the ideal thing. Let the child complete the activity, then we will start talking about it. Because अगर हम delay कर देंगे, it will never come out properly. Never. A healthy expression expect ही नहीं कर पाएंगे. Let them do it. Working alliance develop हो रहा है. I will take it up when I feel that अब हम इसके बारे में बात कर सकते हैं कि ये schedule setup हो गया है इनका. क्या required frequency है, क्या frequency से ऊपर है, क्या नीचे है, क्या बिल्कुल inappropriate है. We can have charts for it, comics for it. बहुत सारी चीजें हो सकती है. Once it is figured out.
Payal ma'am, please.
Okay.
Keep it keep it small and sweet.
Definitely. No, I just wanted to ask you, since Dr. Himanshu was also talking about this cultural diversity of families in
ma'am.
India, and there are so many different types of families, and they have their own family structures, and the way their interpersonal relationships are very different from one family to another. So do you make any home visits at all to your clients' home?
Kanika ji, let Payal ji finish it, and then we can take.
Okay. that case, I would say a treating team is required, because a psychiatric social worker can do this rather than a psychologist or a counselor. जो home visit आप कह रहे हैं, very nice thing pointed out. जो differences हैं वो same नहीं है, differences भी अलग तरीके के हैं. So in that case, a psychiatric social worker का role काफी important है. They can figure out primary head कौन है घर पे economic power किसके पास है, social power किसके पास है, क्या relationship है, boundaries क्या है.
So is it done as a matter of course in counseling that you recommend home visit?
Ma'am, ideally it should have been done, but then all the onus comes to the counselor most of the time.
I see.
Because of lack of resources, to be very honest here. Because it should have been done. Right.
Thank you, Trisha. Wonderful
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.